My dear chap, God.
Now, this looks like a little oriental slipper, doesn't it? Has it come from the Orient? Where did it come from?
Well, it came from Russia originally. My grandfather went out there with the British chess team, and when they left, they were each given one of these. I assume they're all identical, I don't know, but my grandfather had this one.
Wonderful story, isn't it? Well, Russia is certainly bang on. This is what we call a kovsh. It's a Slavonic wine-tasting vessel. But it's been rather sort of shrunk down here. Of course, it's, in practical terms, it can't be used, but
No.
its very shape suggests Russia. But tell me, in your family, what's been its history?
Well,
it's a
I've
chest
known it
prize.
ever since I can remember, and my parents really used it as an ashtray. And I didn't realise till so many years later, and eventually got married, and my husband here polished it. He said,
Very good.
I'll try to clean it, and underneath suddenly appeared the silver.
Isn't that
And it
marvellous?
was jet black before, and I've known it for years as just being jet black, you know,
black.
throwing it around the room. And
Very
what have
good,
you.
very posh to throw it around the room, very extravagant gesture in a way. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about the decoration. It's enamel, but it's in a rather sort of soft kind of palette, but the style of the object is in Russian 17th century style. And there was a huge revival in Russia around and about 1900 with the Romanov tercentenary to remind themselves of their past. And all things Russian were desperately important, and so even metalwork took up this theme. And my guess is, looking underneath, yes, absolutely, that we're going to find that this is by the most distinguished goldsmith, really, of the 20th century, aren't we? I think you've got an idea who it is. Can you guess who it is?
Fabergé, I assume.
Absolutely, bang
It's
on.
the only name I know.
Well, it's called The Last Flowering of Court Art. So we have a truly marvellous, small, deeply attractive piece of Fabergé with a rather checkered history, and it's come through it awfully well, I think. And it's just worth looking at the bottom for a second. There's a dedication inscription, which I don't think it'll be possible to unscramble at the moment, with Fabergé's full house mark underneath the double-headed Romanov eagle, which is a pinpoint to the fact that this is a Moscow piece. And on the side here, we can see in Cyrillic the initials FR, and that stands for Fyodor Rukut, who's the actual maker of this object. And although it was retailed by the great shop of Fabergé, this is what we call a workmaster's work. Fyodor Rukut not only worked for Fabergé, he worked for other people. But happily, all the coconut shies have gone down with this, and we're in a very exciting position financially, coming from a chess prize to an ashtray, being blackened, being cleaned up by a devoted husband, being brought to the Antiques Roadshow. We reached a crescendo of valuation where I think it's perfectly safe for insurance to put this down at £5,000.
Good grief. Aren't I a clever little husband?
You are. I think you better keep him on, you know.
Oh, well, yeah, I will. I think.
Yes, I think so. Good.
Well, they were given to my great-grandfather, who was chef to Edward VII and Queen Victoria at the end of her reign, by the crowned heads of Europe, and some of these are the Russian pieces.
Amazing. Now, do you think that they were objects given almost as a sort of thank you to this?
That's right, yes.
And is this all the things that you have? Are there any more?
No, I have some other pieces which come from Manuel of Portugal, Kaiser Bill.
All the visitors to
All the
Sandringham,
visitors,
all the visitors
yes,
to
that's
Buckingham
right,
Palace,
that's
all the
right.
cousins of the British royal family that are descended from Queen Victoria.
That's right,
In a
yes.
sense, she's sort of fountainhead of this sort of
Yes, she
society,
was.
European royal society.
That's
Let's have a look at those. These are Russian ones, and a pair of gold cufflinks set with rubies and diamonds, alternating rubies and diamonds, in a sort of nugget effect.
Nugget, that's what I've always been told, yes, gold nuggets.
And there's a most marvellous word in Russia used to describe this, which is called samorodok, which means a nugget. And it's a very, very Russian technique, much favoured by Fabergé. And in fact, these are not by Fabergé, and the lid satin rather conveniently tells us that they're made by somebody called Ivanov, working in St. Petersburg. And it's certain that they are a gift from the member of the Imperial family, because the Imperial family's cipher appears above.
Yes.
And do you know exactly who gave those?
I think it was Tsar Nicholas.
He certainly came to London, and he certainly went to Sandringham, and there were many opportunities in which he could have offered those. Tell me about what you know about him as a chef. Why was he so favoured, do you think?
Well, he was a Frenchman to start with, and I understand he'd been chef to people like the Rothschilds and had been to Saltram in Devon. And Edward VII heard of him and wanted him to be his chef, and I think he may have poached him.
What did he look like? Do we know what he looked like?
Yes, I have a picture here.
Oh, isn't it marvellous? And with his
of
family.
his family, with mother, with his wife, and the two daughters, my grandmother and my aunt.
Oh, that's very touching, isn't it? My goodness.
Yes,
he looks quite
nice
sort of...
avuncular.
well, doesn't he? He's a brilliant chap, I must say.
Yes.
And so these were his things. Well, let's just run through them a little bit further. Have you thought about these ones here?
Well, I have been told that they were cufflinks, but they have little rings on, as you can see just there. And I really don't know. I imagine because they were given to my great-grandfather, they must have been cufflinks, I feel, and because he only had daughters, possibly the daughters had them made into brooches or pendants.
I think what has happened, and rather sadly, is that when these adaptations have been made to turn them into brooches, that the marks had been lost. But these are very characteristic of Fabergé's work. We call this guilloché enamel, and it's an engine-turned gold mount that's flooded with translucent pink enamel. And then the Imperial eagle is applied as a gold cipher over and above that. In every way, they're positively reek of Fabergé. But in stamp collecting terms, I can't be absolutely certain. But I can be certain about this one. And does the family history say that that was an Imperial gift?
They do. They do say, the family told me that that was definitely given by Tsar Nicholas.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. And there's absolutely no doubt at all that this is a full-blown Fabergé brooch. It is.
Oh, wonderful.
It's signed.
Because I wondered, and I sort of half hoped it would be, and that's marvellous. Oh,
well, it's a most distinguished thing. Again, the use of the guilloché enamel, yellow enamel in this case, and two colours of gold, little laurel wreaths, and tied with a diamond bow, emblematic of peace, and the Romanov crown set with diamonds and circled with pearls. And we know it's Fabergé because on the back here, there's the workmaster's initials for August Holming, who was not necessarily a specialist jeweller, but a worker in all manner of enamel work. So goodness me, and there's more at home. There's more souvenirs.
Yes, well, a few more. Yes, a few more.
Now, as for value, the cufflinks are impressive. They're very Russian technique, in the manner of Fabergé, but a rose by any other name smells as sweet, but it certainly isn't as valuable.
No.
And I think with an imperial provenance, nonetheless, they are very desirable, very wearable. And a very precise provenance, so I suppose something like £7,000 or £8,000 for the cufflinks.
Really? My goodness gracious me.
Nothing to do with intrinsic value, nothing at all. These, I believe them to be Fabergé from a technical basis, really, and as souvenirs of Nicholas II, which is absolutely certain. I think we can go a bit mad again. £8,000 to £10,000 for those. You feeling calm? It's very, very good, isn't it? Making me nervous.
These are things that I don't really want to sell, you see.
No.
I want to keep, and they're, because they're family pieces.
Well, I think in a way they should be kept together as a collection.
Should they? That's what I wanted to ask you.
Context everything here and provenance, actually. And what about this one? Any ideas for that one?
Well, if these are that price, that must be £10,000.
Well, it is £10,000, and it's more than £10,000.
Is it?
Yep. It's £15,000.
My dear chap, God.
It's wonderful.
That's amazing. I never realised it would be as much as that, I must confess.
No.
Now, before I come on to this rather curious plum-coloured box, let's have a little chat about the ring first, which is fairly straightforward. And there's a connection between the gentleman in the photograph, isn't there, and the ring. Tell me what that connection might be.
Originally, the ring was actually a tie pin, and it was presented to my grandfather, the picture at the back there, who was Thomas Walker. He was a footman at Buckingham Palace, and he was a footman to King George V. When the war was declared, he had to go out to France as a dispatch rider. And then King George V came out to visit the troops, and he came on horseback. And when he came near the troops all clapped and cheered, and his horse reared, and he fell quite heavily. Mm. And fortunately, my grandfather was there, and he recognised him because he'd been his footman. Yeah. And he carried him to safety in a chateau.
So he was quite badly hurt?
He was actually quite badly hurt. And he was actually awarded the Victoria Medal, and then as a personal present was a tie pin, and then that was made into a ring for my mother to wear.
So, a fairly extraordinary singular event. It's a great story. The ring itself has got a cipher, and you can see here George V, G with a V, George V with the crown surmount above it. He enamelled in blue and white and tiny diamond chips. It's worn, it's scratched, but it has a unique story. If I were to say that I'm sure that a collector, knowing the background to it, would pay £800 to £1,200 for it. Now let's move on to this rather, I have to say, worn box with gold tooling round the edge, and in the centre, an interesting little cipher. That little gold cipher tells me that is something that goes back, dare I say, to the Russian royal family, to the Tsar. Tell me a bit about that and what the connection is between this and the lady on the left.
Well, the lady on the left was called Jean Dewar. She worked at Buckingham Palace as well. And when Nicholas II, the Tsar of Russia, came over in 1908, she was the person who looked after his room and him. And when he left, he presented her with the brooch that's inside that box.
Now, one little point there. You mentioned 1908, that it was the Tsar who came over to London, Buckingham Palace. I couldn't find a record of that, but I wonder if it's possible in 1908 the Tsar's mother came over and stayed at Buckingham Palace with her sister, who was, of course, the Queen to Edward VII. Right, the brooch itself. 2 blue stones, sapphires. The little leaves underneath, well, they're green gold. Now, that means they've put a bit of silver in to create the green colour. So that's a bit of subtlety. OK, well, let's have a little look at the brooch now. On the pin, did you see there a little tiny impression halfway along the pin? It's a monogram that tells me that this was made by a craftsman called Thielemann. And he was a craftsman who did work for, guess who? Peter Carl Fabergé.
Ah.
It's in the original presentation case. It's in absolutely pristine condition. Subject to the affirmation of this connection directly through to the Tsar, or maybe to his mother, £8,000 to £12,000.
Goodness.
So Jean and Thomas left a legacy that today has matured into something quite significant. I congratulate you.
Thank you so much.
As soon as I saw this box, which was lurking in the bottom of your handbag, it said something very specific to me.
Yes, I realised it must have done. I couldn't believe you'd spotted it so quickly.
Well, the reason is that it's made of holly wood, and it's a type of wood much favoured by a very famous Russian jeweller. Have you any idea who made this charming little brooch?
Well, when we first found it among my mother's effects, my daughter was looking at it and she said, that's Russian, I'm sure it says Fabergé. And I thought, I can't believe that, because I've no idea where it could have come from in our family.
No. And she was absolutely bang on, because in the lid satin, and satin it is a most luxurious object, this. I mean, the case is just as beautiful in a strange way as the object in it. This is pure silk at the top, and it says K. Fabergé, St. Petersburg, Moscow and Odessa. And it's an absolute bullseye. It's in perfect condition. The only thing that's a problem with it is that the pin has broken off, and that can be restored quite easily. And as you can see very plainly, it's in the form of a tiny little heart surrounded by diamonds.
Yes.
The stone in the middle, have you thought about the stone at all?
Not really. It's one I don't recognise at all. It's a faint green, so.
It is a faint green. I think it's a zircon. It's got a very high refractive index. It flashes rather wondrously, and I think it's a green zircon. But the point about this jewel really is not anything to do with intrinsic value, because I have to say, the material of it is fantastically modest. It's a green zircon, really very low value indeed. The diamonds surrounding it are very low value, and the gold is, of course, completely negligible. But it's heightened with a little flash of yellow enamel, isn't it? It's very artistic. Yeah. And if you look under the yellow enamel, you'll see that you're seeing through the translucent enamel onto an engraved ground. There's a sort of flecked ground there.
Oh, I see. I hadn't really studied it that closely.
Not even when your daughter read Fabergé? You had a closer look then?
I don't think I really believed it.
No, you didn't believe it. Well, we've got to now, I'm afraid, because it jolly well is. I mean, it's really an extraordinarily wonderful find, really. See that funny little hallmark there? Yeah. It stands quite simply for Carl Fabergé. And then 56, which is the gold standard. running down the back of it is a series of numbers, which actually you could live with it for a whole lifetime and never see. This is engraved with a little steel point, and it gives a sequence of numbers which refer to stock books. I've actually had the time to look at the London stock books and check whether this jewel is in there. Maddeningly, it isn't. If it had been in there, we would have known exactly how much was paid for it, when it was bought, and by whom it was bought. I think it's highly likely to have been sold in London. I can date it between 1903 and 1915 from the lid satin. It says Odessa here. That branch didn't open until 1903. It's rather like an archaeological site. There's lots of sort of pulls on it, tiny, tiny brooch, and you think, well, what's all the fuss about? This is, of course, a heart on a bar, and it probably meant love on some level or another. It's a most lovely, lovely find. I find it very touching, actually. This is a souvenir of Russia that's long gone by. When it was bought, it wouldn't have been a cheap object in any way. Having said that it's worth next to nothing intrinsically, Fabergé was not a shop where you expected to buy things inexpensively. It was a shop for an Edwardian elite, really, with enormous spending power. I mean, luminous amounts of money, which we can really have no contemplation of either. And this was a little toy just taken off a shelf for a very specific meaning. It would have cost perhaps something like 30 or 40 pounds. Today, I think it might be worth £8,000.
And a weak at the knees, good gracious.